Welcome everyone, our distinguished panel, partners and participants to our side event for the UN High-Level Political Forum, A Green and Inclusive Recovery for the Amazon. I want to start by saying that simultaneous interpretation to Portuguese is available. You can use the globe icon below to select your language, English or Portuguese. I'm Lauren Barreto. I'm Chief of Staff at the SDSN, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's session. We're gathered to discuss the state of the Amazon in the context of COVID-19, the impacts that COVID-19 is having on the region, the connection between deforestation and disease, and how supporting a sustainable bioeconomy can catalyze development and recovery in the region. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN, convenes the Science Panel for the Amazon to address the region's pressing challenges, including wildfires, deforestation, climate change adaptation and mitigation, inequality, human rights, etc. The Science Panel for the Amazon is made up of over 240 of the world's top scientists who have recently assembled an unprecedented report. It's over 1,400 pages, and we compare ourselves to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but looking at the Amazon. This report is the first comprehensive accounting of the Amazon by scientists. In addition to describing the scale of the current challenges facing the region, it also shares a bunch of bold recommendations to promote conservation and sustainable development, and a number of case studies of solutions that could be implemented and brought to scale. Today, we have an outstanding and renowned group of speakers to discuss some of the panel's core findings and how they relate to COVID-19 recovery. We'll start with Andres Lescano, a Peruvian researcher with a PhD in international health from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Lescano has studied emerging diseases in the Americas for nearly 3 decades and currently focuses on the impact of climate and anthropogenic change on the Amazon basin. Following Dr. Lescano, we'll hear from Dr. Liliana Davalos, Professor of Conservation Biology at Stony Brook University. Dr. Davalos focuses on biodiversity and conserving the world's life support systems far into the future, and she uses genetics, genomics, and statistical tools to discover the mechanisms of extinction and survival of species. We are having a little bit of trouble connecting the following speaker, Andre Baniwa. He was born in the community of Tucuma Rupita in the Upper Icana in Amazonas State in Brazil, where he worked as a teacher in his home community. In 1996, he was elected president of OEB and re-elected twice in 2000 and again in 2004. He was a fellow of the Ashoka Foundation from 2001 to 2003, and since January 2005, he has been vice president of the Federation of Indigenous Organizations of the Rio Negro, and we're hoping that we'll be able to bring him on by the time his turn comes up in the roster. Our final speaker will be Dr. Carlos Nobre, the co-chair of the Science Panel for the Amazon and a Brazilian Earth Systems scientist. He is a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and was when they received the Nobel Peace Prize, so he is a Nobel laureate. He's also a member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, the World Academy of Sciences, and a foreign member of the Royal Society. After we hear from our speakers, we'll take questions from the audience. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom, the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom panel to send your questions, and we will try to take as many of them as possible. We should have ample time for discussion, but just in case, I apologize in advance if we can't get to everyone. Without further ado, I will yield the floor to our first speaker, Dr. Lescano. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and my apologies for not being able to activate my video. Computer glitches as usual. I would like to, there we go, thank you. I would like to briefly speak about some issues related to deforestation and how it links to epidemics, and talk about also briefly about our work in monitoring the impact of COVID and a specific focus on our Amazonic regions. Thank you for the invitation to the organizers, and thank you all of you for listening to this talk. I don't know if I can move the slides. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. So there's very clear evidence of the effect of deforestation in vector-borne epidemics. The epidemics of vector-borne diseases, and specifically in the Amazon. Colleagues like Ami Vitor and Bill Pan years ago described how the deforestation activities in the Peruvian Amazon basin helped to the expansion of Anopheles darlingi and the expansion of malaria transmission in the Amazon. Similarly to Parker and colleagues in 2013, where they describe how logging facilitates very clearly the expansion and outbreaks and epidemics of different sizes of malaria in the Amazon basin, disturbing the environment and creating specific niches for vectors and for disease transmission. Although not necessarily related to deforestation, but also not as directly, we have also seen throughout the Amazon region the expansion of Aedes aegypti, and how together with that expansion has appeared the rise of substantial epidemics of dengue across the Americas, and with very strong effects in the Amazon. But as well, later the appearance of chikungunya and Zika with enormous impacts on the public health of the region and in our populations. And we're still probably monitoring the potential introduction of Aedes albopictus in different parts of the Amazon. It's not presence in all the region, but at some point it's probably going to enter as well. In this is such a plastic vector for different diseases that is probably going to could facilitate down the road the expansion of not a foreign pathogen like chikungunya or Zika, but maybe an Amazon native pathogen that we still don't know. So this is something that we need to monitor very clearly, particularly now that we have very large urban populations in the middle of the Amazon sharing the boundaries of their habitats. And regions like I'm going to speak of what I'm more familiar with, the Southern Amazon Basin in Peru, Madre de Dios region. You have a triple threat happening in parallel: agriculture, logging, and mining, and logging and illegal logging and mining, usually working in simultaneous, and different drivers with different impacts on deforestation, generating their own risk of vector-borne epidemics in the Amazon region, and at an intensity that we have not seen, and as some people claim, an intensity of deforestation that even increased during the pandemic of COVID-19. There you go. And deforestation has been linked to COVID-19, not necessarily in a direct way, but the deforestation-related activities have been very important factors for the emergence of zoonotic diseases. Emerging zoonotic diseases in their time, Ebola, Zika, came from activities of in which human encroachment in wildlife habitats and changes in land use has put us in direct contact with new pathogens. And this is also the story of human coronaviruses, as described by Santini last year in their Nature paper. And it happens also that as we change the landscape, as we change these pristine environments and create degradation and deforestation, new niches appear for different reservoirs and vectors of different pathogens. And this is not new stories for us. I mean, the emergence of Chagas, the discovery of Chagas, it also takes place in a very similar scenario of these Chagas disease in Brazil with railroad expansion. So this is something that we see continuously happening, and we need to take better action at it. Of course, the impact of COVID-19 in the Americas has been huge. Peru has been one of the countries with the highest tolls of mortality in the world, and the Amazon basin, you can see here in our monitoring of the advance of the pandemic, was the first region affected with the highest rate ever recorded of mortality in Peru, although it didn't have the sizable second and third waves that we've seen in other regions. The level of mortality was huge, and this is despite the levels of underreporting that we know exist in the Amazon, and something similar was observed in Brazil. The levels of seroprevalence observed in the Amazon basin have been huge, above 70%, really early on, showing that there's really no protection, that nobody was able to protect themselves. Very few people were able to protect themselves from getting infected. That the health system was in a way unable to prevent transmission. And an important variant, P1, or later termed gamma, originated in the Amazon region. And these levels of infection just led to the population to abandon cautions really early. Particularly, we observed that in Peru. There was a sense that of defeat, that you could not really do much about the pandemic, and therefore people stop, you're wearing masks, stop practicing social distancing. That's been very damaging to future attempts to prevent transmission. So last, I would like to just finish with the non-public health impacts of COVID-19 in very general lines. Yeah, yes, please, the last slide. Yeah, thank you. Because we all know that across the world, and even more in regions that have already very high levels of poverty, inequalities, and disparities, these levels have been magnified by the pandemic. There's greater vulnerabilities, both social and as well in the public health sector. We have abandoned the control of multiple important diseases during this time. There was an ongoing dengue epidemic taking place in the Amazon across our countries at the beginning of the pandemic that had been not attended to. And of course, there's been multiple actors who generated mistrust in governments and health system by promoting therapies of unproven efficacy and questioning the value of immunizations. So in general, all of these situations has made the Amazon a lot more vulnerable to the impact of epidemics and pandemics. So it's a very delicate situation that we really need to address. And I look forward to the talks of our colleagues to hear how we can address this very delicate scenario. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is going to be Liliana Davalos. The floor is yours when you have a chance.
May I project my own slides?
Absolutely. Let's stop this slide sharing and let you pull up your
Awesome.
own.
Fantastic. Thank you. That looks great. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming out to listen to us today on this great presentation. And I love Professor Lascano's presentation because it sets the stage. I want to talk about the Amazon frontiers, the frontiers of change, the places where things are really changing, and what the implications are for diseases more broadly, and with a particular emphasis on emergent diseases that Professor Lascano already touched upon. So this is like the panoramic as it was in the year 2000. A lot of us in this audience are going to be familiar with it. The region that I'm most familiar with is in the Western Amazon, that includes roughly from Colombia all the way into Bolivia. and the rates of change. So the way, something that I've proposed over time is that what we are looking into is this transformation of these natural ecosystems and this into this open land that has implications that are socioeconomic, but they're also ecological. And this ecological transformation, as Professor Lascano laid out, has a tendency towards enhancing a series of risks that are increasingly, they're localized, but they're also increasingly global. So one of the things that we know is that, of course, the Amazon, particularly the western part of the Amazon, covering the so-called Amazon Andes, has this huge diversity of endemic small mammals, rodents, and bats, right? And with this biodiversity, the rapid change in the ecosystem are leaving this biodiversity sort of cramped in smaller and smaller areas. And all of this diversity of species now coming together in ways that they didn't come before. This potentially has a compounding effect that some teams of researchers are already studying with climate change, of course, that we know that with climate change, there's going to be displacement and movement, and we are already observing signs of that. And this displacement and movement, once again, gives opportunities for viruses that have evolved with these different organisms to move around throughout the landscape, presenting a bigger risk. So what are we talking about? So far, I've just kind of talked in some abstract way. Well, the PREDICT project, which has collected data for many years, tried to evaluate, to correlate the risks of emergent, in this case, coronaviruses. This is one of their papers from Simon Anthony with a lot of local collaborators around the world, tracking coronaviruses around the world. And you can see how the Amazon in this first map, in map A, is actually a big red spot. And the reason why the Amazon and the Amazon Andes are bright red spots is because of the diversity of bats and rodents and other small mammals that are present in these landscapes. So what that diversity of potential reservoirs means is that there are these potential routes of transmission, this potential population risks that are there. On B, we don't have as much because it's a type of coronavirus that hasn't been detected yet in the Americas. But you can see how if we take just the diversity of mammals that is present, this diversity of mammals is indicating to us that there is there's a modeling of risk. Now this paper, so this is not already 5 years old. We can say, well, okay, it's a while back. It's just a prediction. Well, if you actually track this alpha coronaviruses, all of the species names that you see on the left of this diagram, all those species names are names of species of bats. And most of them are actually found in the tropics and subtropics, most throughout Latin America. So on the right, we are actually looking at alpha coronaviruses. And what the conclusion of this paper that was literally published last week, this is a paper from last week, can you imagine? It's like a lot of research is coming out right now. The conclusion from this paper is that alpha coronaviruses have been moving around from one species of bat to another species of bat. And this is happening throughout these ecosystems in Latin America, but also in the Amazon. So in other words, we have data that is coming from the genes of the viruses that is telling us this story in which there is an exchange from one species to the other. Now, in this analysis, we're seeing this exchange that is happening from species among species of bats. But the implication is that as we come into more and greater contact, and as species are actually cramped together, populations are cramped together because of the rapid transformation undergoing in the Amazon, we are actually elevating the risks for coming into contact with these viruses. Of course, a lot of these viruses are going to be completely inconsequential. In fact, the majority of viruses are completely inconsequential for human health. The problem is that we don't know which ones are which, and we don't have that capacity yet to know ahead of time which viruses are going to present a risk and which ones don't. We just know that there are lots of viruses. So here's an example already like more than 10 years old that's looking at diverse viruses. These are arenaviruses in the Tacaribe group. We can see them in the Amazon of Bolivia, 3 Machupo, Shapare, and Latino viruses that have been found in the area. And of course, they've received their names because they have caused this small outbreaks. More outbreaks have been found for the Mayaro virus, which is a vector-borne disease that causes a dengue-like fever, and on occasion it causes a hemorrhagic dengue-like fever, right? So this is already dengue-like, and dengue now is present throughout Latin America, and it is a serious health burden. It is holding back the economy and is holding back human health and human well-being throughout the Americas. Here we have a disease that, here we have a virus that is in the Amazon that has been detected. Professor Lescano told us about those urban places in the Amazon, and we see them highlighted here, Manaus, those small outbreaks, right? Now we see these dynamics over and over again. And when we see a picture like this, we ask ourselves, well, do we have the capacity to do the diagnosis? Do we have the capacity to diagnose people for these viruses that seem to be emergent and that seem to have reservoirs in wildlife? And the answer is, of course, that COVID has taught us that the capacity has been very limited, that the capacity for the diagnosis that would enable us to stop a potential larger outbreak is actually rather limited. A lot of these analyses that have been conducted are actually kind of looking backwards in hindsight instead of being able to do in real time. So that capacity definitely needs to be enhanced, and that's going to be my take home message. In my own work, I've looked into early on at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we teamed up with a group of indigenous scholars, mostly from North America, to actually highlight the role of infectious disease, and particularly pandemics by viruses, in enhancing inequality, in creating this inequality. And as Professor Lescano mentioned, this is something that has happened already with COVID-19, in that we have this policy, right? We have this policy, let's say a pro-forest policy, a policy of conservation in the Amazon. And this virus, the COVID-19 measures, because they shut down a lot of functions, they shut down a lot of activities for enforcing the policy, because they left, people were trying to isolate, they were trying their best to do these things. Now we don't have, the policy is kind of not on the ground. And as a result, we have this correlation. This is a paper from last year by Mariana Valle that is showing us Amazon deforestation is showing us increases in the fines. The policy tool that is being used to control deforestation is decreasing, and the deforestation is increasing. And of course, we've all become familiar. Another way in which this, and I think that this is something that there's going to be more research. So this is for the Amazon in Brazil. We still don't have scholarly publications coming out of the Western Amazon in Peru, Colombia, looking at this policy effects quite yet, not as clearly as this one. But one of the things that I would say hasn't really changed, and this is a picture, of course, from before the pandemic in 2019, is that being a defender of the Amazon, this type of inequality, this lack of protection is actually very risky. What I mean is, here's a database of defenders. This is a database that includes all kinds of attacks, but includes murder. And so in Colombia, in Brazil, in Peru, it is actually very dangerous. It's very dangerous to be a defender of that. And the pandemic has actually enabled that trend to be maintained, that trend of risks to human life in trying to defend conservation, and which I think is important to highlight, because again, this is another situation in which, how can we have policy if we actually have deaths like that? And with that, and we see there's some updates from later. I mean, this is a combination of old and new headlines. The database that I just showed is actually going to be updated in a few months. And so it's going to have data from the pandemic period. But it seems like this trend towards having this violent conflict becoming, endemic in the Amazon, violent conflict over conservation, is something that has happened, and COVID-19 has allowed that to persist over time. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much. We are still having a little bit of trouble getting Andre Baniwa connected. So with apologies to Dr. Carlos Nobre, I'm going to ask him to jump in now a little bit ahead of schedule. And we're going to continue doing what we can to try to get Mr. Baniwa on the line. Carlos, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Maureen. Very nice meeting you, Professors Lescano and Davalos. Thank you very much for your beautiful presentations. Let me share my screen in a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay. So I will be, basically, I'm not an expert like Professors Lescano and Davalos on pandemics, on the virus, but I will just report a little bit on the science panel for the Amazon, some key results of the science panel for the Amazon. But you're going to see that really one goal of the science panel is really, to address this issue, green and inclusive recovery in the Amazon. Unfortunately, we are not very close to the recovery. Still, we are on the opposite side in terms of disrupting the Amazon. And as you could see in Professors Lescano and Davalos' presentations, the risk that poses to really the Amazon becoming a source of not one, but many pandemics in the near future. Lauren has already made an introduction, but the science panel we established in September 2019 at the Climate Summit in New York City, organized by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Emma Torres were the people who started this project, and we put together about 240 scientists, 65% from Amazonian countries, 42% women, including 7 indigenous authors, and with a high-level science steering committee, 30 members, and also a strategic committee of respect leaders of and for the region. And then we successfully launched this very rigorous report at COP26 in November, and the report has had a very successful impact, and now there is a lot of interest, and fortunately we are going to continue the work of the panel for at least 3 more years, perhaps 5 more years. And I would actually even to ask to make sure that we are going to expand the panel and to draw attention to many issues, particularly, let's say, this issue of the risks of the Amazon generating pandemics. The main goals of the panel: systematize information for a rigorous scientific assessment. The current state, actually, we started the panel report tens of millions of years ago with the geological evolution of the Amazon, the ecological evolution, and also the human evolution in the last 12,000 years. Then we look at the long-term, these current trends of deforestation, degradation, land use change, including these policies of most Amazonian countries of removing the forest, and also impacting the indigenous peoples and local communities. And then, as Laurie mentioned, we also have a third component in the report that is really looking for a sustainable future for the Amazon, looking for solutions for conservation and sustainable development. So initially, let me just say, the Amazon evolved over tens of millions of years, and the tropical forest in the Amazon evolved in a way of making very efficient water recycling. So between 30 and 40% of the rainfall in the Amazon basin really is a result of the trees recycling water, the trees transpiring water, lots of water, deep rooting systems. That's why the Amazon has a very short dry season, very short near the Andes, 3 to 4 months, the longest dry season in southern Amazon. And that really has maintained the forest for millions of years, including very dense canopy preventing drying out of the soil. So the Amazon forest evolved without wildfires because it's very wet, the Amazon forest. So, and also this recycling of water means a lot of soil moisture comes out of the Amazon basin here in the southern, in the southwestern portion, parallel to the Andes, and feeds the rainfall systems south of the Amazon. So the Amazon is also very important to the rainfall in most of South America, including the Andes. We are unfortunately very close to a state of degeneration. 18% of the Amazon has been cleared, cut, 17% several stages of degradation. And you can see here in the lower figure here, this yellow is an area in which rainfall is something less than 1.8 meter, very wet near the Andes. That's why the forest is more resilient near the ends. But here in most of the Amazon, southern Amazon and also northeastern Amazon, the forest is not very far from a different type of biome given the climate. And also very worrying, this area here, the forest is it's about 5 to 6 weeks longer dry season from 1970s. So it's very close to what we say a tipping point. Most of the Amazon is losing its capacity to be a carbon sink. We have had, due to global warming, very severe droughts, 2005, 2010, 2015, 16, 2020. So that's why we say the Amazon is very close to the so-called tipping point of turning into a very degraded. On the right-hand side here, you see something like, perhaps 30% of the forest maintaining near the Andes and 60-70% of the forest becoming open canopy degraded ecosystem, losing hundreds of billions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, making almost impossible to reach the Paris Agreement targets of 1.5 degrees, and attacking biodiversity as never seen before. And also, and this would be an interesting question to raise to Professors Lescano and Davalos, if this tipping point is exceeded, what are the risks of generating a number of pandemics? So there is no single or simple solution, but really we have to take a very courageous attempt to really move towards this green and inclusive recovery in the Amazon. So we need global actions to protect and defend the Amazon, but mostly the Amazonian countries have to lead this effort for this living and sustainable Amazon. Basically, we have to get to zero deforestation, degradation, and a large scale forest restoration for this huge area of the Amazon, which has been deforested. We have to create a new economy, and we have to empower all the regional societies, including the indigenous people. So again, the report really puts a lot of emphasis on how urgent it is to get to zero deforestation and forest degradation, and also preventing forest fires. The Amazon is becoming very, very vulnerable to fires. And also we have to protect the aquatic ecosystems. We have seen in the last several years how illegal mining is producing tremendously risky mercury pollution into the rivers, many rivers, and this is affecting the health of riverine populations, indigenous populations, even urban populations, which feed on fish. So this is also some other areas. So that basically the key messages of the report are a moratorium on deforestation, forest degradation, and wildfires in southern Amazon. Why in southern Amazon? You can see here in the graphs where is this deforestation and forest degradation, because that's really the area very, very near the tipping point. Then zero deforestation degradation of the whole Amazon by 2030. We have to protect. And And then government and the commitments of the private sector to eliminate deforestation, forest degradation for the supply chains. Those are in areas of critical relevance. And commitment to support indigenous people and the local communities in defense of their traditional territories and to conserve and to restore natural ecosystems. Those are four key messages from the report. And also, we have to restore and protect the aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, and particularly for instance, to create a very large number of agroecological systems that would also give economic benefits to the local communities there, and also restoring aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Basically, we need really to make this connectivity between resilience and landscape, and also, of course, providing benefits to the people. Also, of course, as I mentioned, there's a lot of areas in traditional agriculture, so we need to also to see how to increase tremendously productivity, particularly, let's say, this integrated crop, cattle, and forestry systems, which are much more productive and maintain the ecosystem services. Also, restoring fishery and curbing overfishing, which is, as you know, the assassination of Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira in this Javari indigenous territory was related to illegal fishing as well. So basically, I think one clear idea, and we are starting to produce a policy brief. The science panel is producing a policy brief just to, we call deforestation arc, in Portuguese, arco de desmatamento, deforestation belt, this large area, as I mentioned, more than 1.5 million square kilometers of areas deforested and degraded. And basically, we have to turn this deforestation belt into a restoration belt. So this is really a major challenge for fighting climate emergency, but more important, to protect the rainforest, really to move towards this green and inclusive recovery for the Amazon. So this is urgent activity. It has to be a global activity. And of course, we can develop this new, there is a tremendous potential for the bioeconomy of the social biodiversity, which we call bioecological bioeconomy. The potential is already, let's say, acai berry, cocoa, and many other products which maintain the forest standing and are benefiting much more the Amazonian populations than the traditional agricultural and cattle ranching. So basically, we are proposing this unprecedented challenge. There is no similar model in any tropical forest on the planet, which is this new bioeconomy, healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. So we really have to start implementing that, and very likely in the Amazon. So basically, I want to finish by just saying, let's save Amazonia. This is the key messages of the panel, and we continue to do that work. Let's save Amazonia, let's save the Amazonian population, and this is the Amazon we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nobre. So unfortunately, we are still having some connectivity issues with Mr. Baniwa, but he was able to send us a recorded video message, which he just made when he decided that he wasn't going to be able to connect. So we are going to share that now. I'm going to give everybody a warning. It is in 2 parts. Again, he's in an area with very limited connectivity, so he had to break it into 2 pieces so that the file size was slower so that it could upload in and get to us in time to share it with you. So we'll have a first part, and there will be a pause while we queue up the second half of the video, and then it will resume, and I'll come back on after we listen to his remarks. So I'm going to ask our team to go ahead and share.
Sorry, Lauren, for I'm not being able to share mine. I will send you one second.
Okay, in that case, while I or Catherine maybe get it queued up then, maybe we'll take one of the questions that we have coming in. And just a reminder to everyone as well, please feel free to use the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen to send a question for our panelists. It could be to one panelist specifically or to all of them, however you wish. We're going to start with a question for Dr. Lascano. What was some of the most surprising results from your research on COVID-19 in the region?
Thank you for the question, and sorry for the background noise. I think what the pandemic has shown us is the level of vulnerability. We assumed that we had advanced in our public health efforts, in our the economic growth of our country, addressing inequities, but the level of vulnerability, and not just COVID now, I mean, dengue and other public health issues is too big. And this exacerbated by deforestation and environmental disruption. And this creates settings in which even, public health issues that were not a concern before, talking about vaccine preventable diseases, can be a major challenge for our populations. So it's important to be able to restore not just ecological balance, but also with that the public health balance and address the inequities that this ecological disruption generates. It's important not just because of the environment, it's very important because of the human populations as well. So I love the message from Dr. Nobre of save the Amazon and all their inhabitants, all their species, including us. Let's not get ourselves out of that equation. Let's not just think it's trees and animals. It's us as a human species too.
Thank you so much. And perhaps a follow-up and related question then for Liliana. In 2020, you led a paper on the role of pandemics and linkages to inequality. What do you think are the most striking observations from the past 2 years under this pandemic that you've seen for inequality in the region?
Yeah, I think it's astounding the speed with which we have been able to accumulate evidence, some of which I showed. So with back then at the beginning, so we submitted that paper in that was like in the spring of 2020. So it was early days. We knew that there was a crisis in the Amazon, but we didn't know how bad it would be or how long lasting it would be, or the kind of effects that Professor Lascano has mentioned, like the undermining of the public health system more generally. We wanted to highlight back then this disproportionate effects that are used to grab the land and resources, because this is really what I want to emphasize, that we're talking, this isn't something that's happening in isolation. The virus has opened opportunities for land grabbing, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing, besides those observations, besides this disproportionate effect on marginalized and indigenous groups, we also see scholarly work seeing that there's a synergy between the land grabbing and the virus, right? And that's the work of Mariana Valle that I showed a slide about her results, and I encourage you to go read that paper because it's really interesting. She's able to demonstrate that the land grabbing, there's been an enhancement of land grabbing because the justice system is collapsed, right? All of the social systems, or of the socio-political systems of control are on hold. And by being on hold, it means that you can do things, it becomes an opportunity for people to grab the land. Then the other trend that I would like to highlight, I talked a little bit about it in my presentation. Professor Nobre also mentioned it, is of course this murder, right? This violent conflict that is spilling over in the Amazon. We saw it in the headlines all around the world very recently, but Don Phillips and Bruno Pereira are just two people in the midst of literally hundreds of activists. It is a very risky. And again, the pandemic has played a role because those social political systems of control have been put on hold.
It is very alarming, and that is another one of the conclusions of the report, that Latin America is still one of the 4 countries specifically in the Amazon are some of the most dangerous places in the entire world to be either an environmental or a human rights activist. I believe we will be able to share the video from Mr. Baniwa now. I'm going to turn over to my Portuguese channel because it is going to be in Portuguese, and I'm going to ask everyone to bear with us because I'm going to be honest, I'm not totally sure about the quality. We haven't played it yet ourselves, and I hope our interpreters will do their best, but if they can't keep up or if it's difficult, we'll just have to enjoy the Portuguese.
Boa tarde, eu queria falar com vocês sobre os principais desafios para nós indígenas para a gente avançar na bioeconomia. Aqui no Brasil, na Amazônia, especificamente no Rio Negro e no povo Baniwa especialmente, mas considerando todas as experiências indígenas aqui na Amazônia, no estado do Amazonas, precisamos de investimento para a pesquisa e desenvolvimento desses produtos indígenas. Precisamos de investimento também para conceituação e articulação, para a gente conseguir a questão da legalidade, né, junto ao governo do estado, conceituação de produtos indígenas, que são mais do que somente produtos orgânicos, eu chamo de produtos naturalmente orgânicos. A gente precisa de investimento para pesquisa de mercado, a gente precisa de infraestrutura logística.
Logistics, that's what we need so that we can move forward with the indigenous peoples. We need structure for all this, infrastructure. I see a lot of potential to open a new kind of market from our knowledge, from the products that we have inside our communities. The impact of the COVID in the communities, it was gigantic, it was enormous. We had a lot of fear when we began with COVID. There was the unknown. We didn't know if there were medicines. We sought our traditional medicine, our plants, prayers, spirituals. This is what helped indigenous people, the traditional knowledge, millennial traditional knowledge that helped a lot of indigenous people in various areas. The positive impact, lots of negative impact, lots of deaths of relatives in places that did not accept because of religions practices that condemn this type of knowledge. The solutions that were given to the indigenous people were not utilized properly, all of it. The indigenous people in our country, in Brazil, in the Amazon, have lots of experience that were good in the area of academics. It could be environmental education, cultural education. They're not utilized, they're not valued in the area of medicine, such as traditional medicine.
Give us 1 second, we'll resume the video.
Plantas cosméticas, desenvolver produtos a partir dela, precisa
products from these plants. It's needed to give value to this system, so the health system, so that our system, our indigenous health gets better, and we give value to the traditional knowledge. All this knowledge in the area of fisheries, utilizing resources, all these things are not utilized and not valued in the public policies. We heard the story of the Colombian government when it was elected, that is a left-wing revolutionary and we were looking at it from afar. We live on the border area. We hope lots of relatives have more access to public politics in that country, and that if us looking at in relation to the Americas, to Latin America, South America, we hope in the future that since Brazil, with the new Brazilian president, will be able to become an ally in favor of the protection of the Amazon. Guaranteeing the protection of the Amazon, will have an opportunity to fight, to better fight for the development of quality of the indigenous peoples and people who live in the Amazon, including cities, the largest cities, mid-sized cities, ranches, smaller sites. We hope violence is diminished to fight violence, to fight narcos or drug trafficking. These are the challenges in these areas where we live. And lastly, the system, the model, the actual model that has been hurting and attacking our system of living with the earth ended. This model is no good because it attacks the system of life, biodiversity, things that are important in all the patrimony of the people. These are very bad. There's an urgent need to find a solution, a viable solution that will promote our well-being, a sustainable way of life that does not destroy the earth way of life. I find that's very important. The indigenous communities, we have come up with solutions. We're planning ways to govern our lands, and we need investment to warrant the success of these plans.
So thank you everyone for bearing with us. I'm grateful that, sorry, I had to change my interpretation channel. I'm so grateful that we were able to get an output and a message from all of our 4 presenters. I wonder if anybody maybe wants to take a moment now to, if any of our other panelists want to comment on either anything that Mr. Baniwa highlighted or anything else that they thought was remarkable in the presentations of each other. If there's anything that someone wants to comment on, and if not, we'll return to our audience questions. Go ahead, please, Liliana.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important questions that Professor Nobre laid out was the question of what does a tipping point for the Amazon, what does it mean? How does it translate into viral risks? And the answer is that we have, as Professor Lescano pointed out, we have giant voids in our understanding of how we have not enough surveillance in the wildlife. We don't have enough understanding of how the species are persisting in the landscape and what changes on the landscape, how do they affect the individuals and the different populations that are reservoirs, and in what way do those affect? So for example, I was proposing that this is something that has been found in some cases, right? That as you get smaller and smaller fragments, right? You have contact between species that haven't come into contact before. This is something that's been shown in a number of places, and that has its own risks. But actually demonstrating a tipping point, a situation in which you have one type of ecosystem and it is transformed into a completely different kind of ecosystem, is really difficult. And there is kind of a black box in most research, most of this viral emergent virus research. The role of the host, of the reservoir host, is actually very poorly known. My lab we're starting a project in another area, this time in Africa and Nigeria, but we absolutely need research in the Amazon because we have this huge diversity, as you saw, as I showed the pictures of the diversity of small mammals that are reservoirs of a series of viruses whose potential for human pathogenicity is essentially unknown. And so we have giant data voids that are necessary to answer that question. However, I would say that it is unprecedented. The prospect of a tipping point is unprecedented, and therefore we should be thinking about that pandemic potential as another element, another potential consequence that is very important from that.
Carlos, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, I just want to make 2 comments. First, about Andrea Baniwa's talk. I think we are really lacking in the whole Amazon, but mostly in Brazilian Amazon, to create the institutional framework for valuing the indigenous people's knowledge, local communities' knowledge. So I would say, and André Baniwa is very aware of that, because in Brazil in 2015-16, we started a project, and André Baniwa was part of that project, but unfortunately did not follow through, which was to create the first indigenous university in Brazil. Brazil has, in the Amazon, has more than 300 different ethnic groups. And there are small universities in Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, but not in Peru, but not in Brazil. So I would say this is my first recommendation. We certainly should create more and stronger universities of indigenous peoples and local communities' knowledge. And it will be a very challenging environment, because really to combining the traditional knowledge with Western science is not a trivial matter, but I think we have to face that challenge. My second comment, I would like Professors Lescano and Avalos perhaps to try to answer. I think this is a curiosity of many people, not scientists like themselves, is considering the Amazon has a tremendous diversity of microorganisms, you know, thousands of species of hantavirus, coronavirus, hantavirus, arenavirus, all of those. Why, and also at least in the last 50 years, we have all the drivers of zoonosis present in the Amazon: deforestation, wildlife trafficking, fires, etc., and you know, mining. So all these people are very close to the bats, rodents, and other the hosts of viruses. Why we haven't had any major pandemic like COVID-19 originating in the Amazon in the last 50 years, or even more, even more.
I don't know. Professor Lescano, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we don't want to be in that situation, Dr. Nobre. We really don't want to wait until we are facing another pandemic. And that's part of the call. We have a lack of ability to detect, diagnose novel pathogens as well. And Dr. Liliana has described that, and it comes when even we cannot detect regularly, routinely, our own Amazonic pathogens like Oropush, Mayaro, and some of our arenaviruses, because it's complex. There have been large outbreaks of some of these viruses and epidemics in our countries in previous times. And again, we don't want to be in the situation where we are facing another big one without tools and with a vulnerable environment. But the other issue here is chance. It's maybe a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I think Dr. Davos has a better description for that that maybe she wants to share.
I would say, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because the diversity is there. I would say that it's dumb luck. It's dumb luck, and I'll explain why I think it's dumb luck. So I mentioned earlier on that there are already viruses, and Professor Lescano is bracing it. There are already viruses that are causing small outbreaks. Mayaro, for example, is causing outbreaks, right? And they're vector-borne. For example, Mayaro is vector-borne. And so it's vector-borne, which means that the virus is only going to get around in other places where there's the vector, right? So that means that we can't, it's not like COVID, where you're going to pass it one person to person, you need the mosquito to pass it from person to person. But that, but Mayaro is already throughout the region. I showed you all the hotspots from 2021, all the places where we already have small outbreaks. It's a dengue-like fever. As Professor Lescano said, one of the giant gaps is you don't want a situation in which someone is coming sick, right? And you're saying it's dengue, right? You can't really diagnose, you can't really tell a series of viruses apart, because one is a disease that is already present, and the other is an emergent disease that can spark that wildfire that has that potential. So particularly right now, there's a lot of research on how these environments that are rapidly changing are actually heightening this risk of the viral spillover with all the contact, right? This is the situation in the Amazon, but there's something that's different, is that the Amazon from the past, from all the last hundreds of years, the Amazon has never been as globally interconnected at the high speed that it is interconnected before. So the Amazon has always been a region with ancient trade, ancient routes. This has happened, indigenous people already had their ways of moving around, but it never happened at the high speed that's happening right now, where you can be in Manaus and you can be in Paris, or you can be wherever, right? Like you can be in Lagos, right? The next day. And that makes a difference, because that speed can promote the transmission of infectious disease. So now we have seen with COVID, we have seen with Zika, with chikungunya, with COVID, how fast the virus diseases have come into the Amazon. Now imagine the same going in the opposite direction. Chikungunya, Zika coming, and imagine it with Mayaro. There's a study from last year that says pretty much everywhere in the tropical world, there are potential vectors of Mayaro virus. So meaning right now, these are small outbreaks, right? And again, a dengue-like that sometimes becomes hemorrhagic, sometimes not hemorrhagic, but it causes a huge amount of health suffering, of reduction in productivity, potential death. Now imagine that the vectors are present all throughout the tropical world, and there is one more vector-borne diseases to worry about, right? So sooner or later, our luck will run out. We don't want to be, as Professor Lescano said, we don't want to be in that situation of luck running out, and now we have, which is why I'm a very strong advocate for the kind of interventions that strengthen the ability to diagnose in the Amazon. And that is perfect because it aligns very well with the idea of we need Amazonian universities, we need Amazonian knowledge, right? We need to have these molecular tools in the hands throughout the Amazon to enable stopping the next pandemic.
Could you maybe, or if anybody else wants to come in on this question as well, elaborate upon that a little bit further? We have a question about how COVID-19 may or may not have diverted attention and resources from many other diseases currently affecting the region. It would seem to me that a lot of the solutions to build a more resilient and inclusive health system, are great for future pandemics and increasing the overall capacity and the health and well-being of the region's populations broadly. Could you talk a little bit maybe about if that's true, or like what your priority areas for action would be in addition to scaling up research in universities?
I'm going to let Professor Lescano talk first, because I know that he's got a plan. He's got firsthand evidence of how COVID-19 reshaped the way public health was working in the Amazon.
I mean, we can start with what we faced here in Peru. There were no masks, there were no diagnostics, and we had a population of health personnel who was in vulnerable stage. So 60% of our healthcare personnel had to go home until the health system was able to protect them while doing their jobs, vaccinated and with personal protection equipment. That's how vulnerable we are. And in that process, many healthcare services, from HIV prevention and care to dengue control, were minimized to what could be done in parallel with responding to the biggest pandemic in the last 100 years. So it's a very vulnerable situation, and we realize in retrospect that we should have invested a lot more in the healthcare system, but that would have, and probably more in preventive services. But still, I think investing in having a more equitable Amazon and a viable Amazon in the long term is probably going to be a very cost-effective approach to address these vulnerabilities. So I would not limit it to a healthcare or health systems issue. I think there are broader aspects of it that we need to consider, and we public health people and this panel should not deter attention from the broader issue, I think, that underlies this conversation.
And what I would like to add, I mean, I agree completely with everything that's been said. And I would like, I have a focus on diagnostics because that's my background in molecular biology. And I feel that right now we are at a point where the technology is available so that there's no real reason why we shouldn't be able to have we had situations in which in Colombia early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, there were people having to fly out samples out of Leticia, right? And fly out, at great expense instead of having some measure of diagnostics in place. Now imagine that for viruses that we do not yet understand very well, right? And that's the kind of situation with the diversity of viruses that are already known, such as the Chapare virus and the Mayaro virus, right? We need to create this diagnostic tools. It can even be an Amazonian enterprise. It can even be a business in a way, right? To create this, the technology has advanced so that we do not need to set up, 17 different factories. There can be an advancement in producing the kinds of diagnostics that help us translate, cheaply give access to lots of people and prevent this interface, right? The other component, of course, is research. I mean, being a scientist means that I will always advocate for research for understanding what that interface is made of, what species are implicated, and surveying them. But there is no substitute. In this, I'm completely in agreement with Professor Lescano. There is no substitute for improving the life and the health of Amazonians as the first directive that's going to prevent these bad outcomes in the future.
Thank you so much. I think the point is well taken that this is holistic and it's going beyond sort of a health system or, what comes under the purview of a Ministry of Health. I might start with Carlos first for this follow-up question on kind of looking at the bigger picture, and then, Liliana or Andres, if you want to come in, that's fine. How can we strengthen the broader than policy science interface to address all of these Amazonian issues, to address future pandemics, to halt deforestation, to make sure that politicians are looking to the best research and the best science and, wherever possible, making science-based recommendations? What are some of the things that we can do to, try to promote this going forward in such a way that would really, move the needle on some of these current trends?
Well, that's you wanted me to respond
Please.
to that first? Yeah, so that's a very tough question, because I would say really to answer that question, how to make science to influence sustainability in the policy world in the Amazonian countries, this is very challenging. And I would say the first and top thing would be really we have to start electing better politicians. Hopefully everybody is expecting the new elected president of Colombia will be such a good politician. We have to wait and see. But we have really to, in all Amazonian countries, we have to elect much better politicians who would be much more responsible towards a sustainable future for the Amazon. So basically what we see, I would say my statement, Vel, is more directed to the Brazilian Amazon, but I think this is true in many other Amazonian countries. Even the local politicians in all of these countries and the Brazilian states, they are linked to the development model that exists for 50 years or more in the Amazon. So they're linked to mining, including most of the legal mining. They're linked to the traditional agribusiness sector, which is an expansion, infinite expansion of cattle ranches. They're linked to this organized crime as well, related to drug trafficking, related to selective logging, illegal selective logging, the illegal mining, in the Brazilian Amazon, a lot of land grabbing. I know that land grabbing is also happening in Colombian Amazon after the peace deals with the FARCs. So there is a lot of land grabbing. So basically,
Então, basicamente, numa democracia, e a maioria dos países amazônicos, ou todos têm sistemas democráticos, isso não é fácil. Primeiro, a gente precisa começar desse ponto, de reverter o poder político nos países amazônicos, e a gente tem que apostar em novos políticos que poderiam prestar atenção ao que a ciência diz, como André Banil disse, para levar em consideração o conhecimento das pessoas locais, comunicar-se com elas, que eles já têm mais de 70 mil anos, vários milhares de anos, que eles entendem esse sistema, e claro, com tudo isso, evitar aparecimento de algumas pandemias. Então, eu diria que esse seria o maior desafio. Senão, a ciência avança como a gente está fazendo por várias décadas, por todo mundo, por todos os países amazônicos, como o professor Lescano e a professora Davos apresentaram vários estudos, artigos, até revistas científicas, mas a gente não vê essa ciência realmente mudando a maneira como o poder político está mudando a Amazônia. Então, a minha primeira recomendação seria: vamos votar em políticos que busquem a sustentabilidade que a gente precisa para a Amazônia. Eu gostaria de acrescentar também que tem algumas crises que às vezes são oportunidades, e eu vou dizer o que são oportunidades. As dificuldades é que, olhando do ponto de vista da Amazônia, eu vi algumas amostras aqui, e eu estou dizendo isso porque a maioria da onde fica a população, que seria a Colômbia e tal, e a gente vê que a Amazônia é um pouco longe, mas a Amazônia é muito grande. E a gente tem visto muitos problemas de queimadas na Amazônia. Então, na Colômbia, por exemplo, as cidades de Medellín e Bogotá estão tendo problemas com as queimadas na Amazônia. Então, no começo da pandemia, começo de 2020, teve essa pesquisa de cientistas colombianos que mostraram que os carros na estrada estavam paradas. E aí os níveis de poluição que vinha da fumaça estava muito alto. Então, essas cidades, junto, tem milhões de pessoas, muito mais das pessoas que vivem na Amazônia colombiana, e estavam experienciando, estavam sofrendo problemas de saúde por conta disso. A mesma coisa aconteceu em Brasil em 2019, onde até onde a fumaça estava chegando. E para mim é muito importante para a gente, como cientistas, comunicar isso e dizer: isso não é uma coisa remota. Isso é a realidade para a sua vida agora. A sua vida agora, você pode ter asma, você pode ter alguma consequência, e não é que eles vão somente alguns políticos que vão fazer todo esse movimento. Então, isso acontece dentro e fora da Amazônia. Um movimento em massa que diz: nós queremos parar as queimadas. A gente não pode continuar com esse modelo, porque a gente está tendo muitos problemas respiratórios por consequência dessas queimadas. Então, como cientista, eu vejo a gente falando isso, porque todos esses artigos são publicados em 2021, mas nem todo mundo sabe disso. Então, eu não sou especialista nisso, mas eu leio esses artigos. E as evidências são muito chamativas. O que acontece na Amazônia tem consequência para toda a região, para todas, não só a população amazônica, mas para toda. E por conta disso, a gente pode ter movimentos nacionais que são muito mais poderosos que locais. Alguém quer acrescentar alguma coisa, Andrés? Antes a gente vai para a próxima pergunta? Não, acho que não. Obrigado. Então, vou tentar passar mais algumas perguntas para o senhor Baniwa. Acho que a gente tem ele no telefone, talvez a conexão esteja meio ruim, mas a gente vai tentar. Gostaria de ouvi-lo. O que seria as consequências globais e locais de explorações de negócios locais que são particularmente feitas nas comunidades indígenas e ponto positivo disso, como as populações indígenas podem se beneficiar desses empreendimentos.
Oi, André, pode falar.
Tá bom. Boa tarde a todos. Bom, eu escutei, não sei se eu entendi direito, quais são as consequências globais para as comunidades locais do impacto, né, de mudanças climáticas aí, de aquecimento global. O que tem acontecido nos últimos tempos, por exemplo, esse ano foi muita chuva que superou o normal, já segundo ano seguido, ano passado e esse ano novamente, nas comunidades Baniwa, e isso trouxe prejuízo para a plantação, para as roças, né, e que vai trazer problema de segurança alimentar, por exemplo. Geralmente, as comunidades Baniwa faz roças próximo da beira dos rios, dos igarapés. Então, deu muito problema na região do Ayari, do Içana, né, algumas partes do Rio Negro. Esse é um dos principais, né? Os últimos foi essa. E mudança de estação de ano também tem sido muito ruim. Esse ano a cheia começou muito cedo, geralmente atrasava um pouco mais. Choveu uma semana inteira em São Gabriel da Cachoeira, que não acontecia. Geralmente chovia de madrugada, no outro dia, 2 horas da tarde parava. Então, está acontecendo algumas coisas estranhas, assim, né? Isso também implica no trabalho do dia a dia das comunidades. E agora, essas coisas são negativas, porque a gente tem monitoramento ambiental nas comunidades Baniwa, no Alto Rio Negro, para acompanhamento desses fenômenos, porque a gente sabe, temos consciência que tem impacto dessas ações que acontecem fora, mas que nos atingem localmente, né? Então, a gente está monitorando e toda vez que isso acontece, pega a gente de surpresa e a gente vai tentando monitorar e discutir isso depois, como nós vamos superar isso em termos de território, né, das comunidades indígenas.
I'm sorry, I think both of our interpreters are speaking at the same time. Not a problem. Please, one of you continue.
Lauren, sorry, should André continue?
I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
Desculpe, não quis interromper, senhor Baniwa, por favor, continue o que estava falando, se tiver mais alguma coisa a falar, nos desafios que você está tendo, ou se tiver mais algumas soluções que o senhor estiver implementando na sua comunidade, que o senhor gostasse de comunicar com a gente.
A solução, a gente, em relação a essas medidas para controlar a chuva, a gente não tem como fazer, né? O que a gente pode fazer, a gente não sabe se isso vai acontecer todos os anos daqui pela frente, a gente não sabe se isso vai parar, conforme a gente acompanha que no mundo inteiro essa situação de mudança climática não melhorou, Então, a expectativa é que cada vez mais vai piorar, né? Se começar a ter notícia de que as coisas estão começando a melhorar em relação às mudanças climáticas, talvez comece a melhorar para nós também. Então, o futuro, nesse sentido, é incerto, né? Mas a gente vai planejar se a gente não tem nenhuma notícia de expectativa melhor em termo global que está nos atingindo. É isso.
Obrigada, André. Muito obrigada mesmo. Obrigada por se disponibilizar a entrar por viva voz.
Thank you so much. So we're almost at the end
Muito
of our
obrigado, estamos quase terminando o nosso tempo. Eu acho que o nosso ponto final do Sr. Benil
that, some of the only solutions to protect some of these communities around the world is really mitigating as much as we can anthropogenic impacts on ecosystems, whether it's climate change or deforestation. Maybe we can do one last round of comments, final comments. We'll start with Carlos, then go to Liliana, and then Andres, on sort of your final suggestions for policy recommendations or solutions, or even individual actions that the people tuning in online could do at home to do what they can to try to halt some of this impact that we're having on the Amazon.
Yes, thank you. First, I would just reiterate Professors Lescano and Davalos' recommendation, giving, I agree with Professor Davalos when she said it's damn luck that we haven't had any pandemic originate in the Amazon. So how to prevent that? As Professor Davalos said, we have really to monitor, to increase tremendously the monitoring capacity of Amazonian countries, connectivity with the global scientific community, really to prevent the emergence of a pandemic as bad as COVID-19 or Ebola or HIV or many others. So therefore, yes, there has to be a very effective policy for prevention. But in more general terms, I would like just to say how important it is, the key recommendations of the science panel, get to zero deforestation, forest degradation, and wildfires, as Professor Davalos mentioned very clearly. Fires not only destroy the forest, but they affect the health of all the inhabitants of the Amazon, and even inhabitants living 2,000 kilometers south of the Amazon. So this is mandatory. As we know, the tipping point is around the corner, and we really have to get to zero deforestation, forest degradation, wildfires immediately, but all before 2030. So I think all Amazonian countries' policies, they have to be direct towards this new development path for the Amazon, and also, making Amazon a very important biome for ecological restoration, for removing billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to combat the climate emergency and to protect biodiversity. So I would say those are key messages we have to convey for them to become effectively policies in all Amazonian countries.
So there is this journalist in Manaus, and she moved there. She used to be in Sao Paulo, and she moved to Manaus. And her name is Eliane Brum, and she likes to say that the Amazon is the center of the world, and that's why she moved to the Amazon. And I would say, if you're taking one thing with you right now and you don't really know quite what to do, just consider that, as Professor Nobre said, the Amazon is the center of the world. There is no path to maintaining climate change below 2 degrees Celsius worldwide that doesn't include a large ecosystem of standing forest in the Amazon. There is simply no path. There is no magical technology that can get us to where we need to be without that. So every action at the national and international level that can be taken to protect this only alternative. There is no other alternative. There is no other planet. We cannot fly to another planet. We don't have magical pumping carbon dioxide out of the air, but we have the Amazon rainforest. Every action, economic, political, social, telling other people, saying, hey, did you know about this? Did you know fires in the Amazon are so bad that they can impact the health of your neighborhood? Do you know, like, can we make our decisions based on that? Every action that you take in line with the fact that the Amazon is the center of the world is absolutely needed right now. And that's what I want people to take away from here.
I would just like to add that we need not just all of you who are in attendance to this meeting in order to reach these goals. We need everybody else. We really need to reach out to those who are not in this meeting, or those who believe this is somebody else's problem. That because I live in Lima, I'm not affected by this, because they don't understand that these are interconnected ecosystems. And as Dr. Davalos mentioned, this is the planet we have. And we really need to be ambitious in this fight if we want to accomplish this goal of avoiding a tipping point, of avoiding a catastrophic change in how our planet functions. So please reach out. Please talk to others. Make good decisions when electing your next leaders, and promote leaders that have an environmental agenda with the Amazon and other similar environments in mind, because we may not have other opportunities. The moment is now. Thank you.
I can't think of a better way to end this call than with such an urgent call for action as described. I'll just take this opportunity once again to thank our illustrious panel. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you especially to Mr. Baniwa for his patience in us trying to get him connected, as well as to all of our participants as well for their patience. It was so important that we were able to share his comments, and I'm happy that in the end we were able to. There are some links in the chat if you want to follow us on social media. I hope you will stay in touch with our work. We have exciting events coming up throughout the rest of the year, new publications, new research coming out. And I do hope everybody, will act, will join a multi-stakeholder coalition, will get out there and vote, will do what they can to save and protect and conserve the Amazon. I believe a recording of this will be posted after. If you're interested in that, check back on our website. And otherwise, I hope everybody has a great rest of your high-level political forum if you're joining us and following the events in New York this week, and a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.